Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be sharing what my top favorite brushes are of all time. This is a very highly requested video, and the reason why I haven't done it is because not much has changed since my last one. It has been quite a long time since I've done this video. I'm just very picky when it comes to brushes, and I don't really bring new ones in or filter any out or have any on rotation. I pretty much stick with a core group of my favorites, but I was thinking about it and there are a couple things that are different, so I thought that I would update this video. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Please subscribe and let's get started. So I'm going to start with eyeshadow brushes and mainly blending brushes. I have one brush that's for the lid, and pretty much with this, I wanted to stick with any brush that is just like a hardcore go-to. I didn't want to filter in a bunch of different brushes that I do use from time to time, but aren't a holy grail favorite. I wanted to keep this strictly my favorite, so I wasn't going through like 500 brushes because there's still a lot here. So I'm going to start with fluffy blending brushes. These are the ones that I'm going to start with. So I'm going to begin with Smith Cosmetics. Smith has some of the best blending brushes ever. I love their brushes. They're really high quality and they're very lightweight, and they have a tapered handle, which I really love. This is very unique to any other brush brand that I own. I think this is the only brush brand that does this, where it's thicker right here and then it tapers down and gets really skinny. So the first one that I have, I'm going to show you the largest one, which is the 237, and you can see them up close too. It's just a very fluffy blending brush. Pretty much I would use this for blending eyeshadows in the crease. Pretty much any of these big fluffy brushes for the eyes, that's how I would use it, is in the crease to blend out shadows. You can also use this on the bottom lash line. I will straight up go in with this big ass fluffy brush for my lower lash line. I just look upwards and just wiggle eyeshadows under there. I get questions all the time on how to really blow out the bottom lash line and blend it out so it's not too harsh, and honestly that's how, is going in with a giant brush like this and just wiggling it underneath, because it will end up diffusing that product. And I feel like it seems like this is such a tricky area to navigate. If you just go in with a fluffy brush, it will blend it out and make it look like it blends out into nothing instead of being like super harsh. So the first one is the 237, and then I have the 232, which the 237 that I just talked about, they recently launched. I was using the 232 for years, and I'll show you a close-up of them next to each other. You can see just how the 232 is just slightly smaller than the 237, but again, same idea. It's that tulip shape, which a lot of brushes for the longest time would make a fan shape. So say this is, my arm is like the handle, it would come out of the ferrule, which this here is the ferrule of the brush. They would come out and just kind of poof out like this, and then it would have like this curvature at the top and make like just a fan shape. Like think of like a hand fan that you'd fan yourself off with. That's the shape that brushes normally would make. I'm not a fan of that. I love a tulip shape. So everything from Smith that I have for my eyes is in that shape, where it's skinny at the bottom, gets fatter, and then kind of gets skinnier again at the top. It's kind of hard to tell. Let me see if I have see, I don't even have anything that's more fanned out here because I normally don't use that shape on my eyes anymore. But yeah, these are basically the same brush. It's just the 232 is just a little bit smaller. So the reason why you would want that is you can have the bigger brush to go in a more broad area, and then the smaller you go, it can get more and more defined and more detailed onto your eye. Okay, getting even smaller, we have the Smith 230. This is the same thing. Let me compare it to the 231 so you can see it's just the same shape, just a little bit smaller. Again, I don't really use this much in the crease. I usually use it for like the outer corner to blend out something just right out there. I really use this one on the lower lash line a lot too, because it is fluffy enough to really blend it out and diffuse the color, but it also goes on a little bit more precise. As we get smaller and smaller with these brushes, I'm pretty much going to say the same thing just because that's what I use them for. Personally, for me, I like to work from the background of my eyeshadow up to the foreground. So I'll go in with like my crease shades with those fluffier brushes. For instance, with my eyeshadow now, I have like grays in the crease. So that's what I would use, those bigger fluffier brushes for that step. And then the more smaller and precise the brush is more for those bolder colors that you see up front that pop more. And then we have the 247 from Smith. I know this is not sponsored by Smith or anything. I just really love their brushes. This one, as you can see, it is fluffy, but if you turn it, it gets a little bit flatter. So I used to use this all the time anytime I would do a cut crease look. I just don't really do cut creases anymore, so I don't find that I grab this as much, but I wanted to include it because I've used it for so long. It is such a classic. I'm going to compare this to the 230 so you can see as I spin them, the 247 gets flat on one side where the 230 stays fluffy equally all the way around. But yeah, that's the 247. This is really random. This is another really fluffy brush that I really love. It's from Wayne Goss. It's the number 17 brush. This, I would say, compared to Smith, this is honestly a little bit smaller than the 232, but a little bit bigger than the 230. So it's just kind of somewhere sandwiched in there. But again, it's just a nice fluffy crease brush with that tulip shape. And as you can see, the Wayne Goss brushes are a lot smaller than the Smith ones. It's not your standard size for a brush. It's a lot smaller, which there's pros and cons in that. I think it's just a preference, but I do find that I reach for this from time to time. And then another Wayne Goss brush, which is one of my favorite brushes. I use this all the time. This is the Wayne Goss number 20 brush. So this is even smaller than the 230 from Smith. It's basically like a little mini 230 from Smith. And I love this for the outer corner, just really packing on color over there. Really, really adding some smokiness to the bottom lash line. It's such a good brush, and this is really nice for detail work. I think if you had to pick two fluffy brushes out of this whole entire set, I would do the 232 from Smith and then the Wayne Goss 20. I think out of all of those brushes that I just showed you, you can get the same exact look with just two brushes. The rest, it's more preference. It's more what you'd prefer over another one. And if you want to get crazy and go with 5 million shades like I do a lot of the time, then you can do that with those. But if you're on a budget or you're just not sure what to do, or you already have a lot of brushes and you just want to add one or two to your collection, for the eyes, these are the two that I would highly recommend because you can get the exact same look as you would with all of those brushes as you would with these two. So Wayne Goss 20, love this brush. Okay, so that's all that I have for eyeshadow blending brushes. Now I'm gonna move into more detail work. So the only lid brush that I have is the MAC 242. This is so worn off. I've had this for years. I should get another one, but why? This one's fine. This is really good for the lid shimmer. This is really good for underneath the brow bone. You could use this on the inner corner. You can spray your brush with Fix Plus or a setting spray or something and use like a foiled shadow to get like a really shimmery look on the lid. This is just like my go-to brush for that because it's dense. Brush hairs are honestly something that you'd probably use for like concealer or something, but I love it for the lid. I've honestly used this for years, and there are other lid brushes that I'll use from time to time, but I didn't want to include those because I didn't want to overwhelm you. I feel like any lid brush is pretty good. They're all basically the same. I just wanted to include this one because I do feel like this one stands out among the rest. So 242 from MAC. I have the Sigma E15. All my brushes are so used and worn down. This is my favorite brush for really defining the lash line. So whether that be the upper or the lower, I will use this to wiggle right under here where my lashes meet the waterline and really define that and smoke it up. I'll also use it on the top to really flick out a dark shadow at the lash line and really either deposit the color on there or even blend it out so it's just a little bit smokier. You could use this for a wing, although this is a little bit thicker than I would prefer for that step. You could honestly use this for like brow powder if that's your style. For me, I mainly just use it for the lash line on the bottom and the top, but it's a go-to brush. I use this in almost every single makeup look. Another liner brush from Sigma that I use is the LO6. This is actually technically a lip liner brush. I use it for my wings all the time. This is what I used on my eyes today to create this look. I especially love this for the inner corner little thing that I do here. This is one of the only brushes that can actually fit in there and make it really precise and not go overboard. If I use something like the E15, that would be a little bit too big for that area. So I like this specifically for creating wings like this and, you know, the little inner area. But you could use it for your lips. That is what it's made for. You can use it for lining or cleaning up the concealer, whatever you want to use it for, but I mainly just use it for eyeliner. Last but not least, for eyeshadow brushes, I have the Charlotte Tilbury eyeliner brush, which I don't use for eyeliner at all. This is too thick for me, but I like this for my inner corner highlight or up here highlighting my brow bone. I'll use it to highlight my nose to give that little exclamation point. I'll use it to highlight my Cupid's bow, just for little small areas like that. Honestly, this one in particular, it doesn't have to be from Charlotte Tilbury. It's just this really teeny tiny little pencil type brush that I would recommend. Pretty much every brand has one like this, but this is just the one that I use. I know it's a bougie brand. You don't have to use the bougie brand. It's just the one that I have in my collection. So any kind of teeny tiny brush like this is something that I would recommend. Moving on to the face brushes. So I have quite a bit. My number one favorite face brush is the IT Cosmetics number 7 brush. You can literally use this for your entire face. Let me know if you want a video on that, because I think that would be interesting, just doing my whole face with this brush, because you really could. The only thing I don't like about this brush is that it is really short, and I rarely ever use this end of it. This end, it gets kind of matted up because I throw it in my cup here with all my brushes, and then it kind of gets all gross. And I just find I'm not the kind of person that loves double-ended brushes. If you're someone that you like to have simplicity in your steps and you want something that is dual purpose and has that double end, then you would really like this. But for me, I would rather have this on a totally different brush and use it. And even then I wouldn't, because I don't ever really use this side. But if you wanted to, you could. Anyways, this is my go-to brush for foundation. You could use this if you're the type of person that likes to apply your primer with a brush. You could do this. You could do cream bronzer, you could do cream blush, you could do cream highlight. I would do that with this brush as well. I'd blend in my highlight. You could contour, because it does have this side. You could contour your nose. You could honestly do cream eyeshadow with this and apply that there. This is just a really great brush. You could use it for everything. You could actually use it for powder. You could do powder bronzer, powder blush. You could just do everything with this brush. I think it's one of the best brushes out there. So I highly recommend this. Love this brush. And then for concealer, I love this one. It's the F03 from Sigma. This is technically called the High Cheekbone Highlighter Brush, but for me, this is just what I use for my concealer. And before I forget, I'm probably gonna get questions about why I don't use a beauty blender. I just don't really prefer it. I've tried it here and there again over the last couple years, ever since I really switched over to not using a beauty blender. I think maybe it's because I'm oily, I don't know. I just think that I like the brushes better. And then half the time, anytime I would use my sponge, I would sit down and I'd forget to wet it. So I'd have to get up and go wet my sponge. This is nice because I don't have to do that. And I just really love this brush for blending out my concealer. I feel like it just fits this area really nicely. I can spread it down like this, or I can go back and forth like this. It's just the perfect size, and I really like the way that it applies my concealer. Next, I have two of the same brush, but they actually look a lot different from each other just because one is older and one is newer. It's also stained from my products, so just look past that. These are clean, they're just stained. This is the Sigma Tapered Highlighter brush, the F35. So I have their limited edition rose gold one. I don't know if they even still sell this anymore, but basically I've had this one for longer and it looks a lot more fluffed out, and it's because I use it for face powder. I'll use it to really touch up right here with powder, the center of my face, my T-zone, all of that, and I'll use it to touch up the under eyes with powder. I only use this one strictly for powder, and I know that it's this one because it's the Silver Ferrule one. And then the rose gold one I'll use for powder highlighting. So right here on the cheekbones, on the nose, I'll even use this because it's got that fine tip right up underneath the brow bone. These as well have that tulip shape. I just love that tulip shape that brushes have. It's really nice for applying makeup. Something like this, when it's more fluffed out like this, you could even use this for powder blush. You could use it for powder contour if you wanted, but I mainly just use it for powdering my face and then powder highlighter. So F35 from Sigma. And then a similar brush that I have that I use for the same thing. I don't use it as often just because I prefer the Sigma ones, but I wanted to include it because I do grab this from time to time. This is the setting brush from Real Techniques. This is basically the same kind of thing. You could also use this for concealer if you wanted to. I feel like a cream concealer with this would apply so beautifully. It's just, again, that tulip shape, fluffy, just a really good brush. For bronzer, I've been really loving this brush. This is the Charlotte Tilbury bronzer and blush brush. I never use it for blush. I only use it for bronzer. I love this because this is more of a fan shape. So you know how I've been talking about that tulip shape? This gives a fan shape, and then as you see, as I turn it, it is skinnier on one side, so it's more of like a paddle brush. It's not equally fluffy all the way around. I just love this shape for doing my bronzer because I can bring this up here on the forehead and keep it more sideways like this, and then when I go down to do the cheeks, I keep it like this and not like this because it can kind of start to add more of that contouring effect to my cheeks. It's just the perfect size. One thing too about the Charlotte Tilbury brushes is they have these like indents on the handle itself. You can kind of see it as I turn it here, and it makes holding onto it really, really nice and comfortable. And it's something that I just don't really think about when I'm using it, but now that I'm describing these brushes, I'm looking at them so closely and I can tell that they are like that and I forget, and that's really, really nice. I feel like all brushes should have that and the taperedness that Smith brushes have because it's so cool and so comfortable to use. So really love this for bronzing. And then for contouring, I really love the Smith 112 brush. This again is that tulip shape where it's skinny, fat, and skinny again. This is the perfect size to get into my cheekbone and under here. It's just my go-to ever since I discovered this brush. Really haven't used much else just because it's my favorite. You could use this for anything on the face really that's a powder. You wouldn't want to use this brush hair for creams, but you could use this for anything powder on the face. You could use it for setting the face with powder. You could do blush, you could do highlight, whatever you want to do with this, but I pretty much only use this for powder contouring. And then for cream contouring, I really love the Smith 157, and this is kind of a newer discovery. I've had this in my collection, but I only recently started using it for cream contouring just because I would always use that IT Cosmetics number 7 brush, the first one that I showed you. This is perfect. It's the perfect size. So it has this little wedge shape and it's angled. So it's the perfect size to just boop, 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 get right there in that area. That's pretty much only what I use it for. I don't use it for anything else. If you like really dense brushes for applying foundation, I can see that you would really like this for that step as well. I don't like anything that dense for applying foundation, but for cream contour, it is perfect. So again, 157 from Smith. Another Smith brush that I have here that I almost didn't include because I just don't think it's necessary for everyone. I don't think that everyone will like this brush, but I use it every time I do my makeup, and this is technically for contouring your face, but I use it for brightening up with powder. So after I've gone in and contoured my nose and did my cheeks, I'll take this with powder and just kind of like re-emphasize that area with a little bit of powder, and it kind of brightens it back up. You can see I have a little bit left over on here, and it's kind of just like brightening up those areas. I got this originally to use for contouring my face, but I found that I didn't really like it for that step and I liked it more for brightening. So I'm gonna include it just because I use it. I don't think it's necessary for everyone, but I get a lot of questions on it when I use it because it is so unique. It's just a very, very dense brush. So 124 from Smith. Speaking of contouring my nose, I really love this one. It's the Luxie 182 brush. I'm including this because I use it, but you don't have to use this one. You could use any kind of brush that is angled like this. Honestly, this was like the classic shape for eyeshadow brushes. Do you remember that? Like when makeup started to really like come about, you would get a free brush and it would always be an angled brush like this. Does anybody even use these types of brushes on their eyes? I feel like the only time I would ever want to use something like this on my eyes is if I was doing like kind of like a shape like this, where I would want that kind of shape. This is what I use to contour my nose. It's just the perfect size to get right up in there. Although today I used my finger to contour my nose and I really like the way it turned out, but I don't necessarily use this side except for when I contour on my lip line. Just wanted to include it. I feel like sometimes it's hard to find, sometimes it sells out, so hopefully I can find it and link it down below along with everything else. But yeah, any kind of angled like brush like this is what I would like to use to contour my nose. And then last but not least, my favorite brush for blush is the F40 from Sigma. This is just a classic angled brush shape, perfect for blush. It's the only one I use for the most part. This looks just like the one that I got from MAC which was my first brush that I ever bought ever, like in life. It was the 168 from MAC, I believe, and it was a angled brush just like this. And I remember I went in there wanting them to tell me what to use the brush for, and I got so frustrated that they told me you could use brushes for whatever you wanted to, but I wanted them to tell me that I needed 5 brushes to perform different steps and that brushes could only be used for XYZ. And anyways, this looks just like that brush. It's just a little bit more fluffy and flexible, which I really like. It's the perfect shape to just get in there and apply your blush. You could put it on an angled like this and then fluff it out here. It's just perfect. But that's it. Wow, that went a lot quicker than I thought it was going to go. I hope that I explained each one in depth enough. I feel like they're all pretty self-explanatory. And if you watch my tutorials and any of my makeup videos, like these are all of the ones that I use all the time, and I always link them below. So if you're confused about what brush would do what, just play around, have fun with it. And if you really need more guidance, check out any of my tutorials because I'm always using these exact brushes in there. But yeah, I will link them all down below in the description box so you can check them out for yourself online. As far as like brush sets go, because I get a lot of questions about what sets to get, pretty much anything from Smith or Sigma, Wayne Goss, like those are like my top favorite brands. So you really can't go wrong with anything from them. But yeah, that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. Please subscribe and I will see you in the next video. Bye.